And then the lyrics to this song just finished. It just finished itself in the wake of that journey. So this song is about that.
Like the sea who shelters waves the moon, she died, the sun refused her light. These are the dreamers and these are the dreams.
Wow. Mr. PJ Tracy and Beneath the Mask. Thank you, PJ, so much for taking part in this Sonicstate album extravaganza thingy-majiggy, whatever it's called. Great to see you. So, for the newer viewers, PJ's been a long-term contributor to Sonic Talk, and we haven't seen him in recent years, but he's still very much part of the family. So, it's absolutely brilliant to have him to join us for this project. So, PJ, how are you doing?
Thank you, guys. I'm really well, Gaz. No complaints. Thank you. I feel really honored to be a part of this.
It's a great pleasure to have you. So that song is fantastic. So let's just start then. Is this a new song? Have you written this song for this project?
Nope. I began writing this song a long time ago, maybe 15 years. Yeah.
Okay. I was taking The Mask as an influence.
Right. No, but I'd been meaning to produce it for pretty much all that time. As a matter of fact, I began on it at one point, but I had a hard drive failure, which interrupted that process and taught me a lot about data cleanliness and backing things up properly.
Yep.
But I actually completed this song in the spring of 2015. And yeah, that's when the song was actually completed. But then I just reproduced the track for this project.
Got you. So I was just jumping on the sort of Beneath the Mask kind of aspect. But is there anything to do with the current pandemic and mask wearing being in any way connected with this song?
So the song came top of mind at the beginning of the pandemic because of the lyric, for sure. So I think it just sort of came into my awareness as something that I hadn't completed. And when Andy reached out to do this project, I thought, I'm going to do that. It's been so long since I've produced a singer-songwriter track for myself. Something that I wrote and did from top to tail, that I thought it would be a good idea to try to tackle this one.
So one of the things that's immediately apparent when you listen to the song is the breadth and scope of the arrangement. It goes many places. There's some really sort of funky sections, textural sections, some beautiful piano, and also some guitar. Is that all guitar, or are you a guitarist too, or is it so? Or did you use samples?
I'm not a guitarist. The electric guitar, some of the electric guitar that appears in the track, for instance, in the bridge, there's kind of a beatly rhythm part. That's a friend of mine that played that. My friend Brett Studer. The acoustic guitar I use samples for. Kind of doing my John McLaughlin thing.
Yeah, but it's impressive.
Yeah, and then the beatly sounding lead part, the kind of counterpoint part that happens in the bridge of the song, is actually our friends Dave and Chris's M-Tron Pro guitars.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So when you're composing a song, what is it on piano? Do you primarily write on piano, or do you use the computer as the writing tool?
No, I generally write on the piano.
Mm-hmm. And will you take a song to its completion on a piano, or will you sort of bring it and then use the computer and the studio then as a further way to write a song, or would you rather go in with the song as a complete song first?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It depends. It depends often on the style that the song dictates in my head. I mean, a really good song you can produce any number of ways, But if the song has a lyric and it's calling to me in a certain way, demands a certain kind of arrangement. For instance, this one, it's kind of a kitchen sink sort of thing. You know, my dream of being a super producer comes out in this song. But it's there are times when I'll finish something in the computer, I guess is the short answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the song goes through sort of very distinct sections. I was kind of curious about maybe what the influences were, the underlying musical influences, or whether it just developed more organically that way, or did you consciously go and attempt to do it in the style of an influence, or how did that develop?
Yeah, there is no definite style that I was going for, but the song tells a story, and each section of the song is meaningful to me texturally and in the arrangement, you know, due to the story that the song tells. And when I go back and listen to it myself, I hear all of my influences going all the way
Nice.
back to George Martin and the Beatles, Hugh Padgham and Daniel Lanois and Peter Gabriel, Trevor Horn and Seal, you know, from the 90s, and then more recent stuff like some Japanese artists like Shugo Takamaru, who I just love. And there's a South Korean artist named Midair Thief that I think is on the cutting edge of production, and he's really influenced me.
Right. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
How would you say that your production skills and influences and techniques have developed over the years? And what in this song would you say kind of captures some of your more recent sort of innovations?
That's a good question. So I'm a project studio owner, and I bought the studio that I own and kind of refurbished it in the winter of 2012, the late 2011 into 2012. And I stacked this place with a lot of dream gear that, you know, I'd always really wanted to own. And right around that time, I do commercial composing mostly for a living. And right around that time, the deadlines and the briefs got so short that there really wasn't an opportunity to use a lot of the outboard gear or a lot of my outboard synths on projects. I found that it was just much, much easier to work almost entirely inside the box for the commercial stuff that I was doing. So I felt for a lot of years like I really hadn't pushed my studio to its limit. And that was the exercise in this project. So that was kind of the brief that I set myself, was use all and every tool at your disposal to make, you know, to make this track. And I tried to do that, you know, in the best way that I could. And I think, you know, to be honest, I really exceeded my own expectations. I didn't think I'd pull it off, but I'm really happy with the track.
I'm
glad to be able to say that. Yeah.
There's so many things happen along the timeline of the song. They've packed so many things in, and it really rewards repeated listens. So every time I've heard it, it's kind of been revealing like new elements. It's lovely getting to hear you kind of just getting really loose with the piano at times on it as well. That sounds like fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my favorite thing to do is play the piano. So I thought, you know, I need to have some section of this song that reflects that.
Lovely.
Very, very personal to me.
Yeah, great. So like you mentioned some of your production influences. That voice of yours, wow, that's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Do you do a lot of vocals? Is that something that you do a lot of, or is that quite unusual for you to do?
So I had another life as a performing musician, and then I had some health issues that took me off the road. And at one point, I was the lead singer of a pretty prominent U.S. blues band.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I should have researched this a little bit before. That's amazing. So
Yeah.
your vocals are very emotive. So actually having a grounding in blues is that gives me a lot of insight into that. So lyrics then. How would you typically tackle lyrics? So like the lyrics in this song, for instance.
So the lyrics in this song came to me initially due to some conversations that I was having with a friend about the perennial spiritual journey, just the evolution of the spirit, or the individual, however you see it, the higher self, the mind. And then, I guess I'll just say it like it is. I had a pretty rough childhood, and in the winter of 2013, I was violently mugged at gunpoint. And yeah, and after that happened, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I had a really, really hard time functioning for a while.
Wow.
And it got really bad, to the point where I really didn't want to live. I didn't want to live. I might get a little emotional here, if that's all right.
Wow. Yes.
So in the summer of 2014, I flew to Costa Rica, and I underwent 2 plant medicine journeys under the influence of an African root called iboga. And iboga is a 36-hour long psychedelic journey. And that route saved my life, and just completely went through my entire life, found all of the trauma in it, and took it away, processed it.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I came back, it was literally like being reborn. And then the lyrics to this song just finished itself in the wake of that journey. So this song is about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are personal songs and there are personal songs. Wow. This is an amazing revelation. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. My goodness.
Yeah,
gosh,
you're very welcome.
Wow, that's an amazing thing. So really the song then encapsulates this kind of phenomenal journey of tragedy, but ultimately to triumph.
Yeah.
So I suppose then, from a songwriting point of view, I mean, it's a lot of stuff to work with there, isn't there?
Yeah, it was interesting because I'd felt stuck with that song to the point that I'd kind of forgotten that it was there. I had the chorus written, the first and third verse written, but it was the bridge and the second verse that came to me after the iboga journeys, and it just completed the song. And the bridge is paramount to the song. It's the hook in my mind. I mean, the song's pretty hooky. It's got several hooks in it, but the bridge was about the journey, kind of that we have these identities, these kind of ego structures, these stories we tell about ourselves, but there's always another one. We can always expand beyond them. Beneath the mask, there's always something else to move to. And the end of the bridge says, it's all been a phase. It's always been it's all been a phase. It's only a phase. You're going through something in your life. It's tragedy. It's good. And then you'll move beyond it.
So I'm kind of getting insight now. There's this sort of Beatlesque sort of descending bridge. That's kind of echoes of psychedelic influences. Then, wow, God.
The whole song is pretty psychedelic. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in there. That's yeah,
and to be able to then so. As we've been mentioning, there's such a lot of decoration through the song.
Yeah.
When you are say when you are soloing or when you're playing, do you really try to evoke that underlying meaning of the lyrics in the song in the notes that you're playing?
Yes. Yes, and in the textures. Like to me it's all about the texture of the sound. So it's either how the arrangement elements come together as an orchestration or the surface level or deeper textures of the sonics of the sound. So everything is very, very intentional in that song. And there was a lot of sound design. I broke out all of my analog synthesizers and drum machines. I did a ton of layering. I did a lot of granular synthesis. There was
Wow.
just a lot of like really, really getting into kind of detailing little transitions. There's no straight reverb in the song. It's all reverb and delays and granular delays. And I ran audio from the computer out into analog synthesizers and into preamps and distorted preamps, and I did everything I knew to do to kind of give the right patina to the
Right.
arrangement, the
Well,
thing that I wanted to hear.
can we get a little bit nerdy with some of the gear? What? Come on,
Oh,
give us a
I'd love
little.
to. Yeah. 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 We
Okay.
can.
So, what was the oldest instrument?
Oh, that's a great question. What was the oldest instrument that I used? Um, I think the oldest, yeah, I guess the oldest instrument I used would be my Prophet 12. Yeah.
So, when you are thinking about texture and then looking at the hardware, I mean, you need to have a certain intimate knowledge of those bits of equipment to know where to find those textures that you're seeking. But can you give me an
Yeah.
example of where you've thought about something and then gone to a particular piece of kit for that?
Sure. So there's some. Oh, well, okay. This is a good example of that. A lot of the compression on the vocals for this song, there's actually several compressors on the vocal, but I think what gives it kind of the meat and the texture of the vocals in certain spots is my Zender limiter, which is a reissue of the Abbey Road limiter from the late 1960s that was used on Beatles records and on the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon records. And so you can really get that sound. Yeah. And I fell in love with that sound when I was an infant. I mean, before I could walk, I was listening to those records and just fell in love with them. And that just stuck with me. And I said, one day I want to know how they do it. And, you know,
So,
the rest is history.
so do you find that when you're singing live and tracking through a compressor, do you find that the compressor influences your performance?
So I didn't track through the compressor. I tracked through a Townsend Sphere. Are you familiar with that mic, Gaz?
No, I've heard of no, not that mic. No.
So I bought this mic last summer, and what this mic does is it's a really great flat condenser mic on its own, but then it models other microphones through software.
Okay.
And there's a UAD plugin for it, a Universal Audio plugin for it. And I own a few of the mics in my mic locker that this thing models, and I would say that it's close enough to sound like another iteration of that same mic. You know, some of the vintage mics that it models. So I wanted to put this mic through its paces because I hadn't yet, and so I used it exclusively for the vocals on this.
Oh,
But
that's interesting.
I used several different models though.
Was there any revelations regarding mic models? Did anything sort of make you kind of go ooh and find a really nice match for your voice that you were surprised about?
Yeah, there's a model of a 67 in the mic locker for the Sphere, and that was the mic that I settled on for my voice. Although I did use a version of a modern 87 for some of the background vocals for me.
Nice. And do you feel like when you hear the different models that it actually does bring to mind a different mic? It doesn't sound like it's just the same mic but with a different tonal slant. It convinces you that it was recorded on a different mic.
Yeah, I know what you're asking. I know what you're asking, and I listened for that very carefully. But there does seem to be like a different um, distortion characteristics, almost like a different way it compresses various parts of the tonal spectrum. It sounds very, very convincing to me. Not all of them.
Interesting.
Not all of the models sound great, but there's enough of them in there that it makes the price of the mic definitely worth it, because it's not an inexpensive mic, but
Right.
it's yeah, and it's a great mic on its own, just flat, ruler flat. It sounds really good. So
When I'm working on a project, and if I'm working with a new singer, then we'll go through numerous mics
yeah,
before settling on one. But it is a very time consuming, well, and also expensive business to do that. So
yes.
being able just to flick through different mic presets, it is almost like a dream come true. So I'm always a little skeptical about it. So having that your vocals sound great on this track. So I think that's a
Thank
really
you.
good recommendation in itself. Okay,
Yep.
This is really cool. So you mentioned that you had somebody else come in and play some guitar. Is that the only other person on this track? Is everything else yourself?
No, no. So there's a friend of mine, Angie G. She sang the background vocals in
Oh, of course,
some
background
places.
vocals. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she's in the stack of background vocals along with myself. I sang some of the background vocals, and then there's one other performer on this track. I have an art student who is 10 years old. Her name is Alessandra Gore, and she came in and did a bunch of snapping and clapping and
Oh, brilliant.
hitting of the knees, and I processed those samples and put them in the track.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when you are working with other musicians and being the composer and having a strong idea in your mind, how do you try to get that performance out of your fellow performer without maybe to giving them space, but yet to kind of guide them the way that you want it to go? Do you have any tips for us?
I find that it's a good idea to, if you have the opportunity to build up trust prior, prior to any session, to have a few conversations that veer into the deeper side of life with a performer, so that they feel like they can come in and be vulnerable with you. In a place that is can be extremely vulnerable and very personal, to an artist, to sit and sing in front of somebody and to be judged emotionally and technically on that performance, and to feel like maybe they're on the clock, or that they've spent a lot of time and money and energy to get to this place, and they're nervous. Obviously there are those that have done it a lot and they don't generally feel that, but then I try to create a space of just whatever happens with the artist, so that they don't feel that they're on the hook for anything, that it's not a life or death situation. Because I think some artists kind of come into recording sessions feeling a little bit of that. I know I have in the past. So I just try to do for them what I wish had been done for me in certain circumstances.
Nice.
I try to joke a lot. I try not to take anything very seriously. Just let them know if there's some kind of mistake or taco that they make in the performance. We'll laugh about it, and I'll say, okay, I'm gonna take it out of your pay. Don't worry. Just
Yeah.
dumb stuff like that just sort of moves the session along and keeps it light. And then I usually find if you do enough of that you'll eventually work your way, usually, take 2 or 3 with really good performers, and people who are a little less sure of themselves, maybe it takes a little longer, but you'll get there. You'll get to the thing you can do. That makes sense.
So it's fantastic. No, really, really, really interesting. So when you've got like maybe a bunch of takes, let's say it's like a chorus vocal, and you've got a bunch of takes and they're all technically good. It's not a question of, oh my God, damage limitation. How would you go about maybe a comp? What sort of drive? What helps you through that process and making those decisions? Especially when it's good quality stuff you're comping between.
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? When it's really good quality stuff. But
Yeah.
this answer is really simple. It's a great one, guys. For me, it's my heart. I just wait for the thing that just fills up my heart. I listen for, often phrase by phrase. If I've got really good material, say 5 or 6 great performances all the way through the song, I just go through it phrase by phrase and I listen for the thing that just like fills up my heart. And
Mm.
when I hear that, that's what I use. If
Mm.
that's not there and I'm really invested in the project and I think the artist can get there, and that doesn't happen that often these days if I work with an artist, but it definitely has in the past, then I'll say, hey, I think we need to do some more. Generally what I'll do is
Right.
I'll try to further the project a little bit, do some other things first, and then circle back to it so that the artist doesn't feel like they're put on the spot. I'll just say I think the tenor of this has changed a little bit and we need to go for something else. But
Mm.
yeah, try to be politic. I mean, like 90% of working with artists is politics.
Politics. It is absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh
Hmm.
no, that's great.
Hmm.
So similarly, then, so when you're making kind of qualitative assessments on what you're doing, you have
Yeah.
to have some points of reference, or maybe even some classic songs that you might use as a point of reference. What do you set as kind of like production goals or markers to know that you're in the right kind of place?
I think again, it comes down to how it makes me feel. So I go after an emotional space, and then I think as musicians, as artists, what we bring to the table, in my humble opinion, what we bring to the table is the years of aggregating and synthesizing all of our preferences. I listen to a
Mm.
lot of music. I listen to so much music, and I'm sure you do too. And we listen to all this music over time. We listen to all the interviews over time. We do all the research with the gear and we play around with it. And so I have a lexicon of techniques and textures and arrangement ideas that are born out of that experience, out of both doing the work and listening to the work. And so I reach for the place in me that makes me feel a certain way, and then that makes the decision for me, what tool
Mm.
to reach for, what arrangement decision to make, how
So
sparse or how dense a track needs to be, that kind of thing.
so very very much emotionally led over the technical side of things. That ultimately that is your that's your driver, is the emotional quality of
It
the
it is,
music.
but I'll say this. I mean, there is the intellectual pursuit of understanding as much as you possibly can, in how to produce music. There it is a technical craft and an art.
Hmm.
And I've spent, it's been hard won. There were years where I didn't think I would be able to get to a certain point, or I plateaued in a certain way musically, both at my instrument and in the studio. But I just kept plugging away, and if you just keep doing the work, you eventually acquire the skills you need to be able to take what is in your head and your heart and put it out into the world. And I kind of finally feel like I've very recently gotten to a place where that's true. Where that's true most of the time.
Amazing. So
Hmm.
let's have a little talk about some big influences on you over the years.
Hmm.
Like so maybe a particular album, a production, or a song. What would you say have been milestone moments of influence for you?
It all starts with the Beatles. And maybe all starts and ends with the Beatles. It
Yeah,
begins and
I'm
ends
with
with
you on
them.
that. I'm with you on
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are they are definitely like so many other people. So many other artists. It's almost a cliche to say this, but they are
Yeah.
definitely the most important band in my mind to me.
Oh, yeah.
Personally.
They I mean, they spoilt it for the rest of us by setting a standard that is just unsurpassable. Especially
the number of artistic and technological firsts. I don't think we'll see. I don't think we'll see that again in music.
Impossible.
Yeah,
and it's staggering to think that all of the recorded output is in about an 8-year period, and it's just.
I think about that a lot. Yeah,
it's astonishing, isn't it? Unless I think
can't
it's around
even
7 years.
Yeah. October of 62 until January of 1970. Yeah.
Well, technically, yeah, but when was McCartney's last session? When was the last time that they were all actually there in the studio together? I mean, I know we're getting into
the last session. The last session was for Let It Be, and it was in January of 1970, and it was Ringo, Harrison, and McCartney. Lennon wasn't there. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
I'm a bit of a Beatles nerd. You know?
No, that is good. So it's quite interesting. Paul McCartney has recently released an album, 3, and it's like there's a sequence of his solo albums starting back from his very first one, which was considered a low-key homespun affair, and then quirky one, the McCartney 2, of course. Lots of kind of synthesizers and all sorts of stuff he was playing around with. Have you heard that new album?
I have. Yeah.
Yes, enjoyable.
I listened to it on the day it was released. It was it's great. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've been very, very, very pro McCartney amongst a lot of Lennonites, you see, over the years. So I have a certain sympathy for this conversation.
I think the Beatles definitely would not have been who they were without Paul McCartney, and they may not have recorded Sgt. Pepper Onward if it weren't for him. So
yeah. I mean, they're all as equally important. Anyway, digression, but a very good digression. So, I mean, like, if you were to say who has continued the mantle that the Beatles have set, who would you say has earned the epithet of either the next Beatles or of at least stuff that you could consider on that kind of level? That's a massive question, by the way.
I don't know that I have an easy answer for that. I think there's several artists that I put up there in kind of the second place slot. Peter Gabriel would be one of them. I think of the production work of people like Hugh Padgham or Trevor Horn. I think Imogen Heap does some amazing stuff today. She's really going for it, trying to break a lot of boundaries. Right now, I am enamored with a record that was put out in 2019 by a South Korean artist called Midair Thief, and I highly recommend that record. It's unbelievable, the production on that record, and it's very cutting edge, but with nods to the past as well. And then there's a Japanese artist that I love named Shugo Takamaru, and he put out a record in 2017 called Toss that is really a study in arranging. It's a beautifully done record with a lot of really good pop songs on it.
So I guess the sort of area that I'm kind of curious about, though, is we're talking about the Beatles as being like a number one thing, and unassailable. But what is it that kind of really instills a quality into a song? What do you think are the components for something to be a truly, truly magnificent piece of work?
Wow, that's really good, Gaz. So again, I come back to the heart. I think if it makes me feel something, or touch a place in myself that I haven't yet been? You know, if it opens something up in me where I'm like, wow, I hadn't seen it that way before, then it could be, you know, somebody sitting there with an acoustic guitar and singing, you know, singing the song could do that, or it could be some very, very overblown, really amazing production that does that as well. And there's some songs that get you almost all the way there, but it's not quite. So, you know, I reserve that, you know, that accolade, the thing that I just said, you know, that it opens something up, you know, for a handful of songs. But definitely something like Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes, you know, a song like that, or Here Comes the Flood. You know, the live version of that song when he sings it brings me to tears every time I listen to it. It's just, it's amazing.
It's 100% committed in the moment and the performance of being able to thoroughly engage you into that emotional sort of tractor beam.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that probably wraps up our little interview. Thank you ever so much for your track and for taking time to talk to us with your amazing insights. And also it's just great to have you back, PJ. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you so much, Gaz. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate the chance to do this. And Andy, thank you so much for reaching out and asking.
You're very, very, very welcome, PJ. It's great to have you.
Yeah, definitely.
And Andy and Gaz, I just want you to know these are if I could sit and talk with you guys about this stuff all day, I mean, I'd like to ask you some questions. That's what
God, yeah.
It feels odd to be asked all the questions. You know, I'm curious about your process, Gaz. You know, you know, all of the questions that you asked me, I want to know. I want to know those things about you.
Well,
I'm just super
why not?
curious.
PJ, you can interview Gaz after this.
Oh, I'd love that.
Someone's got to do it. It might as well be you.
You'll have to hear the song.
I want to hear.
I can play you the song.
I am so anxious to hear your. I'm so anxious to hear your track. Yeah.
Do you want to hear it?
Gaz,
I can pipe it through if you want.
Gaz is the only track I haven't heard because everyone's been sending their tracks to me.
Oh,
and
but
I haven't heard Gaz.
You.
Gaz has been kind of like, I'll show you later. I've been in this. I've been in the I've had the luxurious situation that I'm compiling all the tracks together. So the deadline kind of stuff is, you know, I'm able, like behind me now. I've got that's the song that I'm working on, and I'd done a mix last night. I'd done a mix last night, but after talking to Steve Hillier earlier, doing the same thing, Steve's contributed a song to the project. So we did an interview earlier with him. He said a bunch of really interesting things that sent me scurrying back to my song to make some adjustments.
What did he say? What did he say to you that made you want to go back and?